Hi, I'm Leon Gorin, president of PEO Leadership, a peer-to-peer leadership advisory firm. We're an amazing community of CEOs, presidents, and senior executives. Ask yourself, are you learning as fast as the world is changing? It's time for Ontario business leaders to band together for counsel and support. It's time for you to tap into the business wisdom of our peer groups and unlock new ways to grow. I want you to come out of this COVID crisis a better leader and your organization ready for what's next. Take the first step at peo-leadership.com.
Special thanks to Airden Bearless for helping us bring you today's PEO Leadership's Way Forward podcast. I'm going to kick it off just with a quick introduction of PEO and myself. I'm Leon Gorin. I'm CEO of PEO Leadership, and welcome to the Way Forward, our live webcast series. If you're joining us for the first time and you're a CEO, president, business owner, and or corporate executive, looking to grow your leadership capabilities and performance, grow your trusted network, and of course, grow your business, you've landed in the right spot. In this rapidly changing business landscape, the importance of expanding your connections and having insightful and meaningful conversations with the right peers is now more important than ever. At PEO Leadership, our members include some of North America's strongest leaders representing almost every industry. They lead both SMEs and multinational organizations. And they understand the value and importance of being able to connect and think with each other as they all work very hard to successfully achieve their personal, professional, and organizational goals. If you're thinking about the future of your business and navigating through the many unknowns that lie ahead, if you're thinking about your stakeholders and your employees and how will you continue to engage and inspire and support them, especially during this time, if you're thinking about whether and how you should pivot your business and understand the importance of being able to step outside of your organization to learn from others, or if you're thinking and understand the importance of continued learning and the necessity for improvement, no matter what the role and responsibilities you have today, then just take a moment, visit our website. It's peo-leadership.com, and just please connect with us. We'd be happy to speak with you on how we can help make a difference to both your life and your organization. So now before I'm going to introduce Zach, just a couple logistics. Zach and I are going to kick it off. We're going to do our typical fireside chat. Apparently I got a lot of questions, but I will keep it to 30, 35 minutes. And then really we want to get you guys, ladies, all involved in the discussion. So please use the question box throughout the session, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. So here we go. Zach Mercurio is an author, researcher, and consultant specializing in purposeful leadership, meaningful work, mattering, and positive organizational development. He wrote The Invisible Leader, Transform Your Life, Work, and Organization with a Power of Authentic Purpose to provide individuals, leaders, and organizations with the tools to activate their purpose and create cultures where everyone matters. In his work, he's worked with over 150 global companies, not-for-profit, schools, universities around the world. Zach helps forge purposeful leaders and provides practical tools to cultivate positive organizational and team cultures that enable more meaning, motivation, and well-being. Some of his clients and partners include Hewlett-Packard, the Food and Drug Administration, Caterpillar, the Ghirardelli Chocolate Company, Crocs, the Alzheimer's Association, and the list goes on. He's earned his PhD in Organization Learning, Performance, and Change from Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado, where he serves as an honorary fellow in Department of Psychology, Center for Meaning and Purpose, and as an instructor in the School of Education. His research on meaningful work has been awarded the Association for Talent Development, the Academy of Management, and the Academy in Human Resource Development. He writes regularly on his blog and newsletter, and his thoughts on purposeful leadership, mattering, and meaningful work have been featured internationally in media outlets such as Forbes, Inc. magazine, the Denver Post, Psychology Today, and the Huffington Post. Zach lives with his wife, two young sons, and an adopted dog in Fort Collins, Colorado. Zach, it's a pleasure for me to welcome you this morning on our Way Forward live webcast.
Thanks, Leon. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody, for joining in. If you're like me, this delay actually worked for you. I'm always slightly behind schedule, so I would have been right on time if I were you right now. Perfect start time. So thanks for sticking with us.
No, that's awesome. Yes, thank you. So Zach, I thought I'd open it up with maybe some definitions of what purpose is to you, and even how you found your purpose. And I'm thinking from an individual perspective. We'll start with that.
Yeah. So what is purpose? One of the funny things that's happening is people think purpose is a trend or a fad because it's in a lot of blog posts and articles and in the popular press. And if you spent time around a toddler, as I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, there's some commissioned artwork back there. You know that one of the first words that humans use when humans use language to make sense of the world, one of the first words they use is why. I mean, we are wired as human beings to search for purpose. It's our seeking system. It never goes away. The problem is we get into educational systems and work systems that depress that seeking system, but it's always there. We're meaning making machines. And for me, I was the youngest of 3 brothers. And when you're the youngest, if you're the youngest on this call, you know that you get really good at a couple things. 1, entertaining yourself. 2, comparing yourself. I was sort of always searching for significance in my own life. And I was very susceptible to how we generally educate people, especially in the West, which is we educate people for success. If you acquire and achieve these things, then you'll be successful. If you get this job, then you'll be successful. If you get this paycheck, then you'll be successful. We live in this perpetual if-then argument. And the problem is with being motivated in a life by those things is precisely the fact that you can achieve them. And then what? You have to have something else to generate your happiness. So that landed me in an advertising job in Washington, D.C. And on the outside, I was doing well. Everybody thought I was successful and I was really good at it. I remember my manager giving me some really big accounts. I was excited. But I remember being out working with these human beings who were our clients and then going back to the office and talking about how much money we could get out of them. And I just felt, that emptiness inside, that seeking system, the toddler brain. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? I would also hear everybody when they came into the office, they would talk about, is it almost the weekend yet on Monday? And it's astounding and depressing how many people live for 2/7 of their lives, the days that begin with the letter S, right? I don't think that's healthy as a society. So on a lunch break, I had this encounter. I met this cab driver, and I've told this story countless times because it's the only reason why I'm in front of you right now. And I remember talking with him and he asked me how I'm doing. And I grumbled, is it the weekend yet? And it was like a Tuesday at the time, which is embarrassing. And then I asked him how he was doing. And he lit up. He started naming all of the people he had picked up that day, telling me their stories. And there was a spark in this guy that I couldn't quite pinpoint, but I wanted really badly. If you look up in US News and World Report, taxi driver is one of the most difficult occupations, but he was able to experience, and I felt it, joy in that job. And why? Because he didn't talk about what he did. He didn't say my week is awesome, I'm a cab driver. He talked about why he did it. And it was since that moment that I was kind of like, hey, I want to be a cab driver. But then I was like, I really want to learn how we can build a contribution focused perspective and mindset. And so I've really been researching that and working on that ever since. And my purpose is to help people realize their own significance right now. Because when I look at my childhood and what led me to where I'm at, I mean, that's what I needed.
So in the book, and I know you wrote the book a couple of years, but you talked the difference between purpose and authentic purpose. And so how does it evolve into the authentic purpose? And like, what's the difference between the two?
Yeah. So authentic purpose is a genuine reason for being that takes your unique strengths, meets those up with human needs around you. And it's like your fingerprint, where your resources, your unique resources meet human needs. That's when you're on purpose. I don't think purpose is found somewhere out there in a blog post. It's usually right where you are. Purpose isn't out there waiting to be found. It's right where you are waiting to be acknowledged. You have strengths, you have resources. They meet human needs around you as an individual in an organization right now. So it's almost becoming aware of those things that are important. But going one layer deeper, the sociologist Corey Keyes has a great framework for this around authentic purpose. There are 4 types of purpose, right? You can have a purpose that's aimless and useless, meaning there's no directed goal and it's not useful to anybody. Like, I want to make a lot of money, right? Aimless, there's no direct goal, there's no number. Useless, it's not really useful to anybody except for you. And then you can have a purpose that's directed. So you have a goal. I want to make $50,000 in the next 10 years for myself, but it's useless to other people. And then you can also have a purpose that is useful, but not directed. That's like, I want to help people, right? That's useful to other people, but who are you going to help? How are you going to help them? Where are you going to help them? How are you going to know if you do help them? So the key is authentic purpose, Keith says, is a purpose that is both directed and useful to other people. And the crux of why purpose works neuroscientifically and neurobiologically is that usefulness piece. UCLA Semel Center for Neuroscience finds there's a part of our brain that's hardwired for contribution. And when we contribute to each other, we actually get a boost of the neurotransmitters dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, which control for mood, movement, and motivation. Now translate that to work, right? Mood, people feeling good, motivation, having the energy to do the work, and then movement, actually doing things. And that's why purpose is so foundational and important.
Oh, that's great. I'm going to keep us focused on the individual, and we'll talk about the organization because we're going to transform it into the organization. But I always believe you got to start with the leader, and we got a lot of leaders on the call today.
Yeah.
It's an interesting time, right? We've all gone through this whole COVID time. When I think and I listen to a lot of leaders talking, it's almost a time of reflection now. And it's funny because I think purpose is even more important than it was 3 years ago, even though it's always been important. But I think people are now starting to think about it more. What do you've worked with many different leaders. Where would the starting point for an individual be to really start to think about what is my purpose? Where am I being useful? How am I impacting human beings and relating to some of their strengths? Like, where do they start?
Start now, today. And what I mean by that is that you can get a lot of purpose anxiety as well. I talk to there's a lot of executives, a lot of leaders I talk to that are thinking about what's next for them. And what's going to happen when they retire. And there can be a purpose anxiety that happens when we think about finding this one purpose. But there's a big difference between having purpose and being purposeful. And if purpose is our contribution, the reason for which we exist and our use and usefulness, then being purposeful is being contribution centered in our thinking, being, and doing. And so today, right now, think about the next conversation you're going to have and think about, how am I going to use my strengths to positively impact the next person? It's just like, when you wake up in the morning, right? A couple of years ago, I had a bad habit. Get up, look at this thing, my calendar, and I'd say, what do I have to do today? Right? That's how, think about if the voice in your head was a motivational speaker. Hey, Zach, what do you have to do today? How are you going to get through that meeting? Right? It's not very motivating. But one of the things I realized is that it's a pretty bad question to ask yourself. So a purposeful mindset is looking at your phone and being like, how is what I'm going to do today going to affect others? And it's that mindset, right? That purposeful mindset where you think about your contribution and emphasize contribution, your cause versus your achievements and the things you do, that you start to uncover your purpose, as you live out your day. But it can start right now. So focus on. Is it a statement? Purposeful.
Do you have to formulate a statement for yourself that you can visualize? Is it different than a vision in a sense for an individual or an essence?
Yeah. So that's a good question. Statements are very helpful, but more helpful if you have a statement, but you don't believe and act in a way that aligns with your statement, then the statement doesn't matter, right? I always say, practice your purpose before you proclaim your purpose, as an individual and organization. So here's what I mean by that. Like, for example, one thing that you could do if you're a leader and really want to work on this, think about the things like every day, the things that you love to do. Think about the things that you're good at every day. Heck, you could write a list each night. What did I love doing today? What was I good at today? And then the third thing is think about how those things that I love doing, how is what I'm good at, how does that affect other human beings? What bothers me about the world? How do I contribute? And it's at the intersection of those three things, your passions, your talent, the impact you want to make, that your purpose will arise. You'll see trends. And then, yes, I encourage you to start then thinking about a statement, because our environment informs our beliefs. So if you wake up every day and you read a statement of your contribution, if you end your day and read the statement of your contribution, in 30 days, it's going to be very difficult for your brain to not start getting into the habit of being contribution centered. So there are ways to create a statement, and it's bringing to life those strengths. So your purpose is to, what is a strength, an action verb that brings to life? Who are the people you impact with those strengths? And what do you want people to think, feel, be, do, or have as a result of you being on your strengths? But first, and this is what's missed, is you have to learn to be purposeful. Because there's a results mindset and a purposeful mindset. Yeah. Right? I get messages on LinkedIn all the time from people saying, Zach, I'm a results-driven professional. And I'm like, results of what? Even my kindergartner knows that you can't have an effect without a cause. You can't pursue an effect to get an effect, right? You can't pursue profit to get profit. This is a business example. Right. Every effect has a cause, a contribution, and purposeful people are contribution obsessed, and they trust that the effects and results will follow.
That's okay. That's an interesting to put it. I makes a lot of sense. Are there are there any examples, like even for yourself? Do you have a statement? And the reason I'm asking a statement, because when we go to the organization, I'm going to ask you the same thing, like establishing something. And I'm even trying to understand the difference between that vision in an organization and a purpose statement that people like, or are they the same? Like I call it the essence of why we do what we do, right? But do you have an example of a great one that you?
Yeah, the chat might blow up here when I'm about to say this, but a lot of people think that it doesn't matter the difference between purpose, mission, and vision, right? That you can use them interchangeably. I think it matters tremendously, and I have disagreements with clients about this. So, your purpose is mission. If you look at mission, right? For example, the root word of mission means to call, to send out. You're sending people out. It goes back to the old Latin, missionaries, to send out. Can you imagine being sent out with no reason to go out on a mission?
Yeah.
Right. So your mission is what you're going to do, what you're going to do. So purpose is why it matters, why you exist, the reason for existence, the problem you exist to solve, the reason why you'd have a mission. So a mission without a purpose is just activity. Right? It's finite activity. Right. Purpose is the reason for your existence. It's why you exist, the human problem you exist to solve. If your organization wasn't around in 5 years, who would care? That's a great question to ask your board. And why? And is that embedded throughout? And then mission is how you go about delivering that purpose, what you do, how you do it differently. And then your vision is, what do you imagine the world being like if you were done? What would the world be like socially, technologically, economically, environmentally, politically, if you fulfilled your purpose through your mission?
Okay, I think that actually makes a lot of sense. You really put it in the context that you can actually understand it. Because I find also with people get confused all the time. I love the way you define mission, because that makes sense. So jumping into organizations today, right? Yeah. What comes first? So you're a leader, you've picked an organization. This is funny because you're a hired gun. We got a lot of hired guns, right? They get hired by these corporations. They get into the corporation. I wonder how many of them truly reflect whether or not their own purpose aligns with what that organization's about. I hope they do in most cases, but I can tell you it's probably 50-50. What comes first when you come into that organization, or what's more important, the vision or the purpose? Or if you're working with a group, where would you lead them first? Would you lead them to work on the vision and then come back to the purpose, or the other way around?
So I would go right down to the front line in the organization, the front line. I mean, if you're in a distribution center, go to the distribution center packers and ask them, why do you think we exist? And I start there, because it doesn't matter what flashy purpose statement or branding or slideshow you put together. If people at the front line in your stakeholder community don't believe it, and It's not going to matter. So one of the things I would do is I would initially do an assessment. Like if I were going in, nobody's done this work, I would ask people, one, why do you think this company exists? And I would synthesize that data. Two, I would say, what are the values that guide your best work here? And I would synthesize that data and bring it up to the executive team. And I would sit down with a leadership team of key leaders, and then I would answer those questions as well. And I would come together and find some of those trends. And this is an action research process. And this is why it's a little slower than a branding exercise. But it's this slow work that permeates cultures when you get stakeholders engaged. And, there's going to be a lot of things you don't want to hear. I had one leader say, well, if I do this, what if they say the purpose of the company is different than what I want it to be? Well, then what are you going to do? Just apply and force someone into believing something? Values and purpose aren't prescribed, they're believed. And so you have to start with that belief and then use that data from within to craft the purpose. I will also say this, don't get hung up in having a purpose. So this is going to sound odd coming from someone who wrote a book about purpose, but don't get hung up on having a purpose. Get hung up on making sure people, humans, individual humans in the organization can know and see exactly how they contribute. Because remember, the reason why purpose works in organizations is it taps into the primitive desire to contribute and to be significant. And that's accessible whether you have a purpose statement or not. Every job, I always tell my college seniors that I teach, they were graduating, I say, the one mistake I don't want you to make is think that any job exists to pay you. No good hiring manager was like, hey, let's give someone some of our money, right? Every job exists to solve a human problem or fill some sort of human need or desire. Purposeful organizations make sure there's a clear line of sight between the individual, the task, and the ultimate contribution. So if you're not creating a purpose statement, like start there, start with those things, and then build yourself up to where you're in a place to craft an authentic purpose statement using that data. But just like an individual, as an organization, you have to cultivate a mindset as well. I've seen so many purpose initiatives fail because people say, we have this new purpose statement, but we're still going to measure you by self-serving commissions.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Conflicts. Yep.
Yep.
And the role modeling, you got to live by it, right? Everyone follows a leader. That drives your organizational culture around that purpose as well, right? A couple more questions around this stuff. There's a lot of organizations out there today. I sit on boards and do different things as well. And they think they have a purpose, but I'm not sure they actually do have a purpose.
Yeah.
Now, understanding that, do you have examples of some great organizations, because you're seeing a lot, that you can share with us that it emotionally connects with not just the people outside their customers, but internally, like people just live, eat, and breathe it and drive that company?
Yeah, I'll give you a story of a journey, and it's a local one for me. And it's actually a tunnel car wash company. So a lot of people would be like, what's their purpose? And I remember sitting down with Justin, who's the general manager of this car wash service. And they're very big, especially here in the West. And I was talking about this. I said, what's the human problem you exist to solve? And he said, well, I realized it a couple of years ago that no one wakes up and wants to work at a car wash. So think about that for a minute. There's something there, right? Every car wash is saying, we wash this amount of cars, we do this faster, we do this better. He's saying, I realize that I'm hiring people that just get their GEDs. It's a next step to their future. And so he said he spent a year formulating this purpose, that our purpose has to be to prepare people for their future. And what they started doing was they started asking people like why people got their cars washed. And there was profound stories, right? They were part of people's everyday routines, whether they're going to a graduation, going to a funeral, selling a car. And so their purpose is to prepare people for the future and provide for the community. Now, how are they doing this, right? Every time a task is delegated, they tie the task to what the worker will learn ties to their personal development plan. for the future and where they want to go. They offer 401k options. They're also right now in the midst of the pandemic working to build an affordable housing complex for their employees. Right now, they have the average tunnel car washing system brings, you're going to learn about car washes right now, brings about 300,000 cars a year. They wash over 1 million cars per year. They get almost 500 applications for every one position. People internationally want to come work for them, right? Those are the results of purpose, but not the purpose. But his journey of really thinking, what is the human problem we solve, that was even detached from their product, which is hard for leaders, right? Created a unique culture. And that's why I say that, anybody can copy what you do and how you do it, but they can't really copy authentically at your core why you got started and why you exist. And people have tried with them. So it's a really interesting one, because a lot of people say, like, I couldn't imagine it, but I think it's a really powerful story.
Yeah, no, it is. It was funny. I'm reading your book, and I read your bus driver story too, right? Where you went in there, and I'm reading it. I'm getting emotional listening to how you took their stories and how it transformed that organization as well, and created meaning that mattered for each of those individuals.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
You have purpose. Your organization has purpose. You create value. Like, everybody listening, if you exist right now, you create some value for human beings. The key is to make that very conscious, very aware, and embedded and at the forefront of how you approach the work and do the work. And that's the practice of purposeful leadership, right? Purposeful leadership ensures a clear line of sight between an individual, a task, and the end outcome, the bigger contribution, the bigger significance. And yeah, those bus drivers, I went into work with a group of bus drivers and mechanics. And I remember the supervisors being like, oh, this is going to be a tough crowd. They're not going to want this purpose stuff. And I said, everybody searches for purpose. It's probably been locked away by self-fulfilling prophecies. Like, they're just here for a paycheck. Nobody's just here for a paycheck. That may be why someone works, but it's not what they want to experience in work. And so I went into this, and I had them write down. And this is something you could do. This is really powerful practice, actually, if you're listening. Have people, if you're still listening, have people write down. Have people write down. Think of a moment in your work where they most believed that their work mattered. What was happening, who was around, what was said. And go to the people you don't think will have a story. The people, I always get people, they're behind the scenes. They're in finance. It's hard for them to see their purpose, and have them write that. And I remember reading these stories that we had 75 bus drivers. They said they wouldn't want to talk about this. I got 75 stories. One of the first ones I read was by a bus driver who said that, a mechanic who said that they were at the funeral of a pre-kindergarten student. Yeah. And the kindergarten student who passed away, his parents saw them with a badge, the school district badge, his mechanic shirt he was wearing, and said, I just want you to know that the bus ride to school was the highlight of my kid's young life. And he said that's why I come to work. I need this paycheck. That's why I work. But why I want to keep coming every day is because of that. And that's accessible in any organization and in any job.
Yeah, that really stuck with me. Like, yeah. You really hit a core point of it. And it's funny because I think about us as leaders today. We get so busy, so carried on in terms of what we're doing, and taking your story and just even being able to walk the front lines, right? You said that was be the first thing you would do. Doing that on a regular basis and asking the questions about people and their jobs, creating their importance, that they actually mean something to not just the organization, what they're doing is just so important. And we don't do enough of that because we're overloaded. We think we're overloaded. And it is such a key piece to keeping our organization moving forward.
Yes, feeling seen is a basic human need. If someone doesn't feel like they matter, it's extremely easy for nothing to matter. If you have a motivation issue in your organization, you probably have a mattering issue. Because, and what your point is noticing people, affirming them, showing them that they're needed, I mean, that's a basic need, but there's been recent studies that find that over 67% of people in US companies, for example, indicate that they feel invisible at one or more times in work. And it's simple things, right? This is not rocket science. Maybe I'm pricing myself out of a job, but this doesn't cost much money. It's really going back to the fundamentals of being human, right? The fundamentals of leadership. And great leadership is tremendously boring, right? Great leadership is remembering someone's last name, knowing who someone relies on, who relies on them, knowing if their kids' names, knowing the new hobby they started, knowing whether their dad's in the hospital, noticing whether they're suffering and offering an action to help. If you look on LinkedIn, nobody posts, I remembered someone's last name today, but it's actually those things, those little things that create legacy, not your big product launch, right?
Yeah.
It's remembering someone. And so that's
it's
a good
funny.
question.
I don't know if you read this article recently, but it was on Amazon, and Amazon does some great things, but they talked about their people in the warehouses.
Yeah.
And the idea around, it's good, actually, they turn over every 2 to 3 years, and it increases productivity because, you get tired in your job and it's boring. So when you come in the first few weeks, it's a learning curve. Then you become really productive. After a few years, it probably just makes sense to change it up. And it's totally counterintuitive to what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Anytime you use a human being as a means to an end, they cease to be a human being to you.
Yeah.
They're a tool. So it's easy for me to say that. Like, the luxury of my job is I don't have to do any of your jobs, right? So it's easy for me to study how people work. You're in it, right? And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Sometimes I get this way. Sometimes I find myself like, oh, I need this person to do something for me, right? But it's the awareness of that and making sure we're not treating people as simply a means to an end. And when I read that Amazon article, I said, this could have been about 1,000 companies.
Oh, yeah. It's not just Amazon.
It's not. It's just indicative of when we use human beings as instruments for self-serving material gain, there is no long-term positive effect when you play that out to its end on people, organizations of the planet. Simon Sinek says that's the finite game.
Yeah.
A quarterly earnings report is finite. Shareholder return is finite. It's just like me, right? If I get that job, then I'll be happy. A lot of organizations operate like toddlers in the backseat of a road trip. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Right? Versus sitting down and really thinking about why we're going there, the process of going there. And so that's the value of shifting from a results mindset to a purposeful mindset, is you have more long-term thinking, which is so important.
So I'm going to open up for questions. I know people are putting questions in the chat, so I'll look at the chat, and I'll also look at the Q&A. Before we head into the Q&A portion of this webcast, first, a brief note about PEO leadership from one of our members.
At PEO Leadership, I'm surrounded by other business leaders who challenge me to become better.
Les Mandelbaum, founder and CEO of Umbra.
Leaders really need to step outside their world and get new perspectives.
PEO Leadership is more than peer-to-peer advisory. It's a community of top executives with global experience.
Our retail landscape is rapidly changing. PEO Leadership has been vital in helping us navigate through this.
The time to step up and lead is now. Go to peo-leadership.com.
Zach, in relation to where we are today in the post-COVID world, I know the US is ahead of Canada and stuff. The big issues on leaders' minds today, and again, I'm fortunate because I sit in all these different groups, these advisory boards. One, how am I getting everybody back to the office? They've been working at home. Can I continue to sort of build organizational culture when they're only in there 2 or 3 times a day? 2, burnout. Even the leaders themselves are burnt out right now. Right. And you and I talked about this quickly too. Like, I don't think things are going to slow down. We're going to go into a roaring economy now. If you were burnt out today, I can only imagine what's going to look like 3 or 4 months from now. And then the third, that's going to lead to a lot of turnover, people looking for different jobs. And then the other element with this changing world, finding talent is going to become insane in terms of great talent with new capabilities to allow you to continue to grow. As I think about these things and I come back to purpose, right? What an advantage an organization has if they're driving meaningful things that matter. They're valuing their employees. They're recognizing their employees. If you haven't been doing that, or they're showing empathy during this time, if you haven't been doing this, you've got some real problems potentially coming. And that comes back to your business trend, right? Where is purpose becoming a trend? And I'm like, it may be becoming a trend because this is what's going to happen and is currently happening.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? Like, you must be immersed in this stuff right now.
I am immersed in it. And I think that, I mean, what would you do? What would you give up to feel significant every day? You know, like, let's just think about that, right? And a lot of people say it's a generational thing. I've talked to rooms of every generation. I said, how many of you would prefer not to feel significant in work? No one raises their hand, right? We got to get back to the basics, right? One is, I think that what you're going to find emerging from this is there's a few forces. In every major economic or social disruption in history, an existential crisis, mass existential crisis has followed. Second Industrial Revolution. Emile Durkheim, the sociologist, did a famous study on suicide. And what he found was that it wasn't the loss of work, a job, income, that caused mental distress. It was the loss of the ability to contribute to something beyond the self. In the Great Depression, it wasn't the loss of income, it was the loss of a sense of self, sense of identity. In the Great Recession, the 4 times higher were the visits to mental health facilities Stanford found after the Great Recession for people who kept their jobs. So now you have these forces of, one, you have job and health insecurity. So job plus health insecurity. You have rising social unrest and rising awareness of social and racial justice. You have people who are called essential by the government returning to work and asking, is my organization treating me as essential? And you have people who are unemployed, who are susceptible to feelings of worthlessness, uselessness, coming back into work. This is all coming together to create a meaning deficit. And where is that going to be filled? Well, it's going to be filled in the place where people spend over a third of their waking lives. And so I think one of the greatest responsibilities of leadership going forward is going to be to create mattering for people. I think it's a societal public health need. I mean, how we make meaning in work is inevitably how we make meaning in life, even if we don't want that to be true. You know, a lot of people say, well, I just work for a paycheck. I compartmentalize. Psychologically, that never works for the long term. You can't compartmentalize 35% of your waking life. Your seeking system, your toddler brain, is still going. And I think organizations that can answer those big why questions, can show people that they matter, notice, affirm, show people that they're needed, remind people that they have strengths, show them their significance, and create environments that are emotionally and physically safe. Those are the companies that are going to thrive. And if you're not doing those things, it's probably going to be in 20 years, just like in the 90s, people are like, do I need a website?
Yeah.
You know, I think in 20 years, people are going to be like, now people are like, do I really need a purpose? Is this purpose thing real? You know, I just need to, make enough money to survive. I think that just like if you don't have a website now, you're irrelevant. I think that if you don't have that bigger purpose, invest in putting humans first, you'll be slightly irrelevant in 20 years.
Yeah.
I know it's a big statement, but when you look at just social, mental, public health from a despair point of view, like you talked about burnout, Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and concentration camp prisoner, wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He wrote, despair equals suffering minus meaning. And when we think about like burnout, for example, one of the biggest causes of burnout that a lot of people don't talk about is depersonalization. So it's inertia. We do the same thing every day and we forget about why we're doing it. And so if someone asks you, Leon, why are you doing this today? No, it's just because Zach said so. And that inertia, when we disconnect with the significance of our work, can really result in burnout. And so leaders can bring people's significance of the work back into the work.
Yeah. You know, it's time and effort of a leader, right? And understanding the importance of it is to really slow it down in a sense and spend the time, ask the people and explain to them how they're actually impacting someone down the chain, not the organization, but someone who is either going to use that product and serve, and how possibly you're changing their lives. And it's really just conversations, right? And understanding, because most employees, we don't think about that. And we're never asked to think about it. We're just there to 9 to 5, a lot of them, right? Got to get through the work today.
Right.
And anyway,
yeah, I think the one thing that to keep in mind is it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be huge. If you can just show people how they're significant, it's powerful. I was working with a big manufacturing company, and as you know, supply is a mess right now. And so they had to have a whole shift cover another shift of 60 people so they didn't have to work Saturdays. And there was a ton of grumbling, like, oh gosh, why do we have to do this? And I said, well, how are you telling them to do this? Well, they would say, hey, we got to do this. We got to step up. All this stuff's going on. And I said, well, what would those 60 people who wouldn't have to work Saturdays be able to do with their lives on that Saturday? And then they started talking, be with their kids, do what they want to do. And I said, instead of telling people, oh, we have to go help this other building out, this other plant out to make sure that, just because we have to, tell them, imagine that you can help 60 human beings have a Saturday with their families.
Yeah.
Just say that.
Yeah.
You'll be amazed at what showing people how they matter can do instantly, just changing the way you talk.
Yeah, that's huge. It's absolutely, it's trying to provide meaning. The context is so important here. You hit it dead on.
Yeah. And
all right, I'm going to go to some
leaders
questions.
Are meaning givers. I mean, and that's the thing. I think that leaders can be purveyors of meaning. I mean, you can shape the storyline, the through line, the why we're here. But it's a deliberate habit in practice.
Yeah. And it can be started at any time. And I think you opened with that, right? You can start now. You can start doing these things now. It's not like, oh, where am I going to start? I'm going to go to some questions here. Kyle the Tastic, I'm going to read the questions. What are some good questions to ask to figure out how our actions affect our team? Example, I don't know what my contribution has been if I don't know how the people in my team received what I offered.
Yeah. So one of the things is some questions, but also a tool that I like to use is a cycle and a habit of purposeful affirmation, right? We have the capability for each other of showing each other the evidence of our contribution. And Kyle's right on, right? Like we know our meaning based on the evidence of our meaning from others. And that's what, if purpose is contribution, that's one of the only ways to get feedback. So one of the things that is really powerful is anytime you're saying thank you to someone, or anytime you're saying good job, don't just say good job. Make sure you're creating a culture where people show people the difference that they make. Describe specifically the situation that whatever you're saying thank you for happened. Describe this, name the strengths they used, and then show them exactly how those strengths made a difference. Tell them the story of the impact on you as well. So a couple of questions, you could ask your team is, like, to help you feel like you matter, what might I need to start doing and what might I need to stop doing? Like, that's a great question right there. Or when you leave conversations with me, what do you feel? What are you motivated to do? What are you thinking? Right? So it goes two ways. I think you have to create a culture where people are giving people the evidence of their significance. And then also ask some of those more targeted questions that get at your impact.
Yeah, you reminded me, we were doing 360s with our leaders and then we had some feedback systems afterwards. But the psychologist I was working with, the one thing that stuck with me is every interaction that you ever have with any individual, whether it be in the hall, in your office, on the front line, at the end of that conversation, and it's not just a conversation, now it could be through digital means too, put yourself in that other person's shoes. Are you leaving them engaged, inspired? Are you leaving them down and out? Like, how's that person feeling now? And it's a starting step, baby step in terms of moving people and getting them engaged.
I love that. And one of the questions that I use is like, even if you say you have to deliver negative feedback or if to send an email, ask, is the way I'm doing it going to extract from this person's energy or regenerate this person's energy?
Right.
Because oftentimes we want people to change. We need people to change. But what we do is we give them feedback in a way that extracts the very energy they'll need to change.
Right.
And we get ourselves into these downward spirals. But purpose is really helpful with that. So you could say, I have to lay someone off today. How would my purpose do that? How would my values do that?
Yeah.
And so it can be a really tremendous guide. When you know why you are, you'll know what to do.
Yeah, that's good. All right, I'm going to go to another. I have one from Priyanka. I apologize if I'm pronouncing names incorrectly. I'm actually terrible. Zach, how do you think MNCs, I hope you know what MNCs are.
No, tell me.
I don't know.
Can strike a balance. Multinational
company. Okay. Can strike a balance between yielding material outcome, revenue, and creating a purposeful culture in the organization. Everything you're saying is insightful. By the way, they're loving it. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. I don't think you can separate the two, so we get into this material gain and then we get and purposeful culture. Every financial outcome is mediated through a human being. So what is the quality of the medium? The human being, right? Like think about it. And so we get into this short game, right? Where we think about the outcome. It's material gain or its purpose. It's profit or its purpose. No, it's profit because of purpose. So you can deliver more of your purpose. And so think about that. Like to get the result you want, what would be the optimal health of an individual in your organization, individual human being? And how will you support that health? For example, it's the difference between a lagging indicator and a leading indicator. Peter Drucker once said that profit is not the purpose of a business. It's the test of that business's purpose's validity in the world, right? So the purpose, that the outcomes are lagging indicators of the leading indicators, which are people and human beings. So it's more a matter of emphasis. And I do think you can do both. I think that you can, and quite frankly, I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say something maybe controversial, but if you're such a great business leader, you should be able to figure out how to turn a profit and how to care for people.
Absolutely. If your business model makes sense,
right?
Absolutely.
Like, we should be able to figure that out, and we should have a redefinition of what a good business leader is. And I think that definition has to be, first and foremost, that you are responsible for where thousands of human beings spend a third of their waking lives. If you want to find a cause or a purpose, look inside first, because the most impactful thing a company can do for the world is to make sure that where people spend a third of their lives is dignifying, meaningful, and creates mattering. That's the ultimate social purpose out there.
I know what you're saying. On the multinational corps, it's interesting because Canada, for example, has a lot of subsidiaries, right? So your head office could be in France and the United States. And often, especially during times that are difficult, the leader in Canada, for example, will get the call and just say, listen, time to lay off 5% of your staff, your profit's not there.
Right.
And so that leader sometimes, even though their culture, it's almost like they're running two cultures sometimes. You have a culture, which is not a great multinational corp, but you have different cultures in different countries. And that leader faces a lot of pressure. They actually have to, they can lead by purpose. They can have a subculture almost that they're protecting their people. But when you're dealing with head office, the pressure, unless head office is of the same context and the same belief, it is often putting these leaders in really tough situations. And I see it all the time with the multinational leaders and on running the subsidiaries.
Yeah. And if you're in that situation, well, one is, I think, focusing on what you can control is really important if you're one of those leaders. A lot of people say to me, well, Zach, what do I do if my leader doesn't believe in this stuff? Well, no one can tell you not to create psychological safety, matter, and connect with people, show people they're needed, right? No one can take that away from you. So focus on that. But my hope is that it does have to permeate and start at some point with beliefs from the top and behaviors from the top. And it's simply, and I have a lot of empathy for a lot of the leaders and executives who, you are responsible for people's livelihoods. I mean, you get up every day and you have to think about that quarterly earnings report, right? And what that's going to look like. And I have a lot of empathy for that. I don't have to do it in my job. So I have a lot of empathy for people who get up every day and have to think about that, the weight of that. And I think the key is if you're in an organization, having some empathy upwards in the organization and starting to open up where you can some of these conversations of, well, how can we do both? What are the leading indicators from a people perspective to getting those numbers that you need to hit? Really quickly, just a really quick example of how quick a shift can be. I had this VP of sales who said to me, Zach, I like your work on purpose, nice little talk on purpose, I think she said, but when people don't hit their numbers, I need them to hit their numbers or they're not going to have jobs. And I go, well, what do you do when they don't hit their numbers? And she said, well, I usually get them together.
I don't have any information about
that. My Google speaker. She said, thanks, Google. So she said that I get my leaders together and I say, hey, we need to get the numbers up. How does that go? Well, it's a 15-minute meeting. I say, what if you just got them together and said, how can we contribute more to our customers to get the numbers up? The room opens up, right? And that's an example of how you can be purposeful in pressure.
That's great. I'm going to go to Marie. I'm finding these in the chat, these questions too. Okay. Concept of languishing is emerging during this phase of COVID. How does a leader stay passionate about their purpose and motivate others to stay passionate about their purpose? She picks it up, start with themselves, right? And it's tough. How do you stay passionate about your purpose every day? What do you do to reinforce that for yourself?
Yeah, I remember when I was writing my book, I asked someone how to write a book, and he said, write the book. he said, writers write. Purposeful people think about their contribution. And sometimes you have to force the action, right? So like at the beginning of my day, I do look at my calendar and I do ask myself that question. I just write it down. How's what I'm going to do today going to impact other people? At the end of the day, what are the questions you ask yourself? It starts with the internal narrative. And this is when things are good and when things are bad. Elvis Presley once said, when things go wrong, don't go with them, right? So you have to take account to this question. Are you reacting on instinct or are you responding on purpose? And what I mean by that is that oftentimes when something happens, we feel fear, anger, frustration, all emotions that actually narrow our attention on ourselves and on survival. Whereas when you think about how would someone with my purpose respond here, it helps create a little space between stimulus and response. And this is why all of those things like emotional intelligence, awareness, all of these leadership ideas come together and are critical foundations of being purposeful. But you got to force yourself into a habit. Like, how do you write when you don't want to write? You sit down and write. Yeah. You set a timer and you write. It's just like anything else. So I encourage people to develop some habits, also team habits. Like you asked in one of your bullet points, you had asked, like, how do you maintain a culture in a time where people may be working remotely? Make sure that you have dedicated space for ways of being as much as you do for ways of doing. And what I mean by that is we're really good at doing things with one another on Teams. We jump into a Zoom meeting, here's the agenda, but make sure you create space where people can talk about how we're being with one another, how we're communicating with one another, what we need from each other. And that can really help as well. So you can create team habits where you're collecting and telling stories of the work's impact. You're giving nudges to, this is why we're doing this. And a leader has a lot of power in creating those habits at the organizational level as well.
Oh, that's great. Those are great tips and really important today in that environment. Because again, the Zoom, everyone talks about the efficiency of this thing, right? Let's get on. We've got our agenda. Right. And we're forgetting that whole element of sort of connecting. And
they're like update festivals.
Oh yeah. They're nuts.
Update. Then get to something of some importance. And we don't have time. Yeah. But just carving out like 5 minutes to ask, does anybody have a story of when they experienced the work we do mattering in the last week? Just 1.5 minute conversation can reorient the whole meeting.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go last question here, and I think it's
Yeah.
a great one. Curious to know the purpose behind the title of Zach's book, The Invisible Leader.
Yeah. There's an amazing woman, 1928, Mary Parker Follett. She was an activist and also a management scholar as a woman in 1928, which is amazing. If you have a chance to read any of her writings, she's sort of like this oracle of management thinking that no one knows about. And she said that both leaders and followers are following the invisible leader, the common purpose. And I really believe that great leaders get out of the way and they let the purpose become the ultimate leader of the organization. And in our lives, what if the purpose was your boss? What if your purpose was your boss? What would you do? What kind of actions would you take? And I liken it, if you like plays or you like books, a good book or a good play, they all have a through line, right? It's the essence of what the story is about. And it's invisible. Nobody says this is the through line that's keeping the plot together. No, but just all of the actors know how to act. They know what demeanor to make sure they're aligned with the through line. The books, the structure is aligned with the through line. That's the invisible leader. It's your through line. So what's your through line? What's your storyline of your work and of your life? And when we don't have a storyline, we get a lot of wasted energy. But when we do have that through line, we get a lot of harmonized energy. And that's the power of the invisible leader, that bigger purpose.
Well, I think that's a great way to finish off our call today. Zach, thank you so much for joining us. Well, here it's this morning. It's still the morning in Colorado.
It is, yes.
And really sharing your insights. Fantastic. I urge you all to pick up the book. I know it was written in 2017, but it is a fantastic book. It's absolutely relevant to where you are today as you think through stuff personally and think of stuff within your organization as well. A must. And then Zach, you're doing lots of writing as well these days. So easy, just Google him. Google Zach and you'll find a little bit of what he's writing on his purpose stuff. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so much, Zach, for joining us for a great session today. If you're interested in our Way Forward live webcast, please visit us at poleadership.com. You'll find a number of recorded past webcasts that have included Kim Scott and Trier Bryant, Erica Dawan, Morgan Housel, Joe Jackman, Harry Kramer. The list goes on. We are going to take the month of July off. Woo! We're all feeling a little. It's been an incredible 15 months doing this. And we'll be back in August with Drew Travin, where we'll try and bring some humor into the workplace. And Drew, just background, he's an engineer. So you go engineering, humor, workplace. That should be interesting. So really looking forward to that conversation. Until we meet again, I'd like to wish you all a fantastic day and a great first half of the summer. I don't want to rush it. We'll see you all in August. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Leon.
Aird & Burles is a prominent Canadian law firm with a well-established local, national and international practice. We provide strategic advice in all principal areas of business law. Regardless of size or sector, our professionals are dedicated to providing exceptional client service. Let us focus on your legal issues, so you can focus on your business. Contact Tony Joya or Bill Chalmers to discuss ways we can work together. Please visit airdburles.com for contact information.